let me give you a little introduction, Jane. So Jane and I, first of all, we go back at over 20 years, I'm sure. Been a great friend and client for years. She's a 30-year veteran in the business.
36.
How many?
36.
Oh, okay, 36. A few more years added on. She's obviously a pillar in the Maryland real estate community. You've been consistently ranked among the top producers in Maryland, and many times the top producer. The capital region and nationally, you're well known for your market acumen and your relentless service. You're also, I know many times that you're interviewed by stations of TV stations, and you speak, you're involved in a lot of community things. You are the voice of being the expert, which is, I think, very cool. And I really think it's helped your business if you look over periods of time. So you, with your team, your highly specialized assistants and buyer agents, sell around 200 homes a year. Your sales have long exceeded $1 billion, but that's not how you measure your success, is by volume, but by the numbers of clients who become lifelong friends, as well as your close ties to the neighborhood that you live and work. And like I said to people just a second ago, I mean, Jane, you and I go back a long time, been friends for a long time, worked together for a long time, been a great client and lots of fun. The reason, and so thank you, Jane. It's an honor to have you on this call. One of the main reasons that having you on this call is that, we have a number of clients that do a lot of business, but they have difficulty in pricing and price reductions. And I know you have some very exacting thoughts on how this should be done, kind of the thought process behind it. And so I think what we'll do is we just start and you want to start with the pricing first, Jane?
Sure. Let's start with pricing, because it's hard to get to price reductions if you've done pricing wrong. So my number one absolute in pricing is never own the price you put on a house. It can never be your price, because if it's your price and it doesn't sell, then you're wrong. So you never ever want to be the owner of the price. And here's your rationale to your seller. So there is a difference between price and value. Price is something that is set by sellers and real estate agents. Value is determined by buyers, and it's determined in the marketplace every single day. So the definition of value is that it's a moment in time, and it's based on what else buyers can buy the day they go shopping. So when I am looking at a house and I am saying to them, here's where your value range is today, but tomorrow the market could be different, because today's value assessment by me is that you are among the following listings out there. This is your competition, and this is how you fit in to that marketplace. But you could go to bed tonight and every single one of your sellers could have dropped their price $100,000. And when you wake up, you are now an overpriced listing, and you did nothing. You just woke up. So the important thing to always say to sellers is buyers determine value, and value is set by the competition. So when they shop, they look at 3 houses before you, they look at you, and then they look at 3 houses after you. And if they're not coming back a second time, you have a price problem, because value does not show up in the eyes of the buyer. So the difference between price and value is something you must talk about in the early beginning of your listing presentation. And remember, when you have to go and do a price reduction, they can't get mad at you, because it's never been your price. It's been what the market has said your house is worth at that moment in time. Okay, so moving along, when you're on the phone with your seller, there are a couple of, when they first call in, or when you speak to them and you say you want, you all are setting up an appointment, there are several questions that you have to ask to get prepared. And one of the critical questions that you asked is, why are they selling? Because if their motivation is, I'd like to sell, if I sell, I sell, if I don't, I don't, you don't have a motivated seller, so you're kind of wasting your time. I wouldn't say don't go, because when you're there, they might say something else. But be aware that their reason for selling is going to turn around and be your hammer to get them to drop their price. Second is, how long have you owned your home? So at least you know that there's some equity. They didn't buy it 2 years ago. Have you already bought a home someplace else? This goes to their motivation. How soon do you need to move? Another question that gets to their motivation. And I always ask, what do you feel your home is worth? So that I'm not blindsided by stupidity. So at the point at which we're on the market, I am looking at, activity. And you know as well as I do that if a house is on the market for 2 weeks and they haven't had anyone back a second time, they might have a price problem. I mean, even in a slow market, there are buyers out there looking for value. So, it's important to be aware of activity. And I always say to my sellers, you will know if you're in the game if buyers are coming back a second time. I will know if you're in the game if their agents are calling me and saying, my buyer's really interested, we're going to try to see if we can get our lender and our parents to give us a gift loan or whatever it's going to take. I generally get a heads up, and you as a seller will get a heads up. If no one's coming back a second time, and I'm not getting agent calls, then we have a price problem. And I'm just telling you ahead of time, because if that's the case, we're going to have a conversation on day 15. Okay? And then, of course, we get that expectation understood. So at that point, I have collected all the agent feedback. We have their lockbox reports. We know the agent cards. We have legitimate feedback. But even if I can't talk to the agents, we know why it's not selling. We knew when they insisted on a certain price. We know why it's not selling. So it's up to us to start to give them the market feedback. It's not my opinion. It's what the market's saying to me. Here's what buyers are saying. Here's what agents are telling me. Your bedrooms are too small. Mr. Seller, what they're leaving off of that conversation is, compared to the other houses I looked at in your price range, I could get bigger bedrooms. It's a comparison statement. Everything a buyer says is a comparison statement. Your basement's not finished. I can go down the street and buy at that price a finished basement. You're always trying to explain to sellers that they are not the best house on the tour. I always show them this picture. I don't know if you guys can see this. It's the top row of houses shows 4 big houses and then this one. So you never want to be this house on the tour, meaning you are less than what anybody else can buy. So let's just say they're all 1 4, 1 4, 1 4, 1 4, and 1 4. Why would you, for 1 4, go to the house with the least number of amenities? You always want to try to be this house on the tour. The house with the most amenities, with the most finishes, with the most renovations, whatever most is in your market. That's what you're trying to be. Mr. Seller, today and yesterday and last week, you were this seller. If you're going to be this seller, you need to change the price on your house so that we get a new buyer that hasn't already seen it, and we get a new group of sellers to compete against. So what we're saying is, if you are listed at $1,450,000, you can't go to $1,425,000. because those buyers have seen you. You have to go to 1,350,000 because now you're going to compete against a whole new group of houses, and you're going to get a whole new buyer that comes through the door that hasn't seen it before. You've changed your comparison to a new group that you may be more comparable to. So that's the rationale that I give them. And then I write them at the end of, we do what we call this is a 16-day report, marketing report. We do 16 days or we do 30 days, depending on the market that we're in. And what I do with that report is I give them all the things that we've done since we listed the house. So there's a heading called Preparation for Registration of Your Listing and Sale of Your Property. Then the other group of the activities under Target Marketing to neighborhoods and prospective buyers. The third group of activities, promotional campaigns to active real estate agents, and then marketing and activity reporting. And then in that, I remind them of how many days they've been on the market. I tell them how many homes have sold in their price range since they've been on the market. And here's my script. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you have been on the market for 16 days. In those 16 days, 6 buyers had the chance to buy your house, but bought something else. You don't want to go another 10 days and another 6 buyers don't buy your house. So we're trying to give them these numbers. That's a critical number, because what that says to me is you've missed 6 opportunities in your marketplace. And then, of course, I talk about how many houses are out there still competing with them. Some will have come on the market that weren't there when we did their initial pricing. And then I just review with them quickly the websites they've been on, the number of views they've had online. This had 36,000 views. You know, just all the things that we've done. So I make sure it's not my fault. You can't blame me. We are getting eyes on your house. You have a price problem because the buyers don't see the value. And then I go through a conversation of what I've learned from the agents and the buyers in the marketplace. And it's always what I've heard, what I've learned, what I've researched, not what I think. So at the end of that, I say, you know, what we're hearing from the agents and the buyers, your price should be somewhere between 1,299 and 1,325. You know, I give them that number that reflects all the information that we gave them. But before I get on the phone, after I've sent this to them, before I get on the phone, I have a sheet that I fill out because I want to remember all the things that I need to remind them of. So this says, the first one says, why are they selling? And I fill that in. What is their mortgage balance? What's their current list price and how long have we been at that price? How many days on market? The number of buyers that have been through there, the number of homes sold in their price range, the number of sellers competing against them now, and the suggested price reduction. And I write that out for myself if I don't have the pink sheet in front of me that also gives me that. But it doesn't give me everything. It doesn't give me some of the information that's on here. So I use these 2 sheets. But if I've sent this report ahead of time, I mean, it's wonderful. It's easy. There's very little resistance. So several things I know for sure. I'm working with a motivated seller, and I've done my very best to reflect the value of this home in today's marketplace. Any questions?
You have to unmute yourselves if you have a question. Anybody? Okay, Jane, I have a question.
Okay.
The sheet that you use, that you said it's not your opinion, it's the information you gather.
Right.
Can you give them a little bit of an example of what's on that sheet?
So so this is what let me read you a little bit of what I've written here. This was a 60-day activity report. It has been 16 days since your home came on the market, and while this is not a long time, it is worrisome that 8 buyers bought homes since you've been on the market, but did not buy your house. This means 8 times a buyer had the chance to buy your house, but chose to buy one of your competitors instead. We have had 7 agents show your property during this time period, and the feedback is very consistent. Number 1, the buyer looking at your house is a move-up buyer. They are selling a home that is smaller, and they're looking for more space. 2, the majority of the buyers looking at your home are looking at homes in the Potomac, blah, blah, blah. I just do the comparison. Agents tell us we are losing buyer opportunities because we are only 3 bedrooms upstairs. You can see this in the homes that were sold in the past 2 weeks. I've attached the 8 homes that sold while you were on the market. You will notice that all of the Potomac homes are 4 bedrooms, 2 or more baths on the 2nd floor. In zip code 20817 and 2854, which is our competitive market area, there are 37 homes for sale between $750 and $850. 19 of our 37 competitors offer 4 bedrooms or more on the 2nd floor. Another objection that buyers had at our current price is that you only offer a 1-car garage. In reviewing your competition, 22 of the 37 homes competing against you offer 2-car garages. 4 of the 8 homes that sold offered 2-car garages. I recommend we discuss repositioning your house in the marketplace so we do not continue to lose buyer opportunities to our competitors.
Nice. So that's really a price reduction letter that kind of, it's an automatic once they get that.
Right. And then, most sellers will say, well, what have you done to market my home? So
Right.
The first 2 pages of this is what we've done to market their home. It's very hard to say you're not doing enough.
So read just 3 or 4 things, 5 things. I just want people to get an idea.
Okay, so in the first section where it says preparation for registration of listing and sale of property, I have 6 things listed. Install a lockbox, obtain all necessary property details, fill out and process all necessary paperwork, upload it to MRIS and GCAR, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Photo shoot. Under target marketing, prepared and delivered information packages on property to prospective buyers generated from phone campaign, internet inquiries, and sign calls. And then all the places where we advertise on the internet. And then promotional campaign to active real estate agents, pitched at office meetings, emailed new listing announcements to 4,700 recipients on our database, emailed brokers open invitation to 1,700 of the active agents in our area, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we're saying to them in those sections, we're working hard for you, and it ain't working.
Good. So just before I forget, can I get copies of those?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Send you.
Okay. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And by the way, before we go on, any questions on anything at this point? Anybody? You have to mute yourself if you want to talk.
Sorry, can you hear me, Ken? Ken?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Hi, Jane.
Yep.
It's Barry.
Hey, hi.
Nice to see you. Thanks very much. Sorry, I'm having problems with my mute in and out.
Okay.
I'm interested in your process, your intervals, such as you took the listing and then when did that letter come out? Is it a 30-day letter, and what's the next letter, or what's the next call? Just the timelines.
There is no absolute time.
Okay.
So, but the first letter I just read you went out 16 days after the listing was on the market. And the reason why it went out quickly is because 8 homes in their market, group sold.
Right.
8. So I couldn't wait. I knew there was something wrong immediately. I needed to alert them.
All right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in a spring market, you can't wait. In a spring market, I tell people, once you're on the market for 15 days, you and I are going to meet. We're going to have a real talk.
Did you preset the appointment?
So, it's funny because I have a lot of sellers who know when I call them, they shouldn't answer the phone. So they have that. It's or I'm out of town. I mean, I have prepped them so well for my call. So let me say to you guys, when I'm talking to my sellers, I say to them, as a seller, you only can control three things. Three. You control the price you put on your house, how easy it is to show, and the condition in which it shows. How well does it show? And the other thing is access. How easy is it for agents to get in? So price, condition, access, and I don't remember the other. Oh, location also, but you don't control location either. So that's all the homeowner controls. So assuming that you have great condition, you have a lockbox on your house and access is really easy, the only thing left for you to change in a market when you're not winning is price. Because the things that you don't control, which really you have to hammer this home to sellers, and I have a sheet that I give them. Number one are market conditions. So market conditions can be weather, if it's in the winter and there's, nobody can get out of their houses because it's 15 inches of snow. It could be interest rates are up. It could be the major employer in your town just left. That's going to affect the ability of anybody to sell anything. So that's a critical thing for you to understand. You don't control it, and neither do they. The second thing they don't control is the number of sellers they compete against, but more importantly, the motivation of those sellers. So if you're a seller who is, if I sell, I sell, if I don't, I don't, and you have a seller that's competing with you who calls me every Friday and goes, don't sugarcoat it, Jane. We have this last weekend and then I have to be in Chicago. What's the price? And he's willing to go down $100,000. You'll never win against him. So you have to be prepared to compete in a marketplace where there are going to be sellers more motivated than you. And finally, you don't control value. No, you don't. You control price, but price is not value. Value is controlled by buyers, and it's determined every day in the marketplace by what else buyers can buy the day they see you. That's it. End of story. That's value. Don't get mad at me because I don't create a marketplace every day. I just have to deal with it.
I love that line about that we're not just competing with the sellers that come on the market, but their motivations.
Right.
That is empowering.
Exactly. I mean, I do a motivation scale.
What is that?
So I have a motivation scale that I give to sellers when I see them, and I give one to the wife and one to the husband. And I ask them to put on their, circle the number that best reflects your desire to get this house sold. And it goes from 1 to 10. So 1 through 4 is what I call an experimental seller. If I get $1 million for my home, I'll sell. It's worth 400. So, they're not real at any level. They're just wasting your time. 5 and 6 are what I call casual sellers. And these people really would like to sell. They're people that would like to move if the price is right, will maybe buy a bigger house or go to a condominium or change their neighborhood. They're not in a hurry. They're only casual about moving. They'll say things like, I don't have to sell. They want some number and I'll wait for as long as it takes to get it. These are the kinds of things you hear these people say. And they will not drop their price or give terms to sell their home. So that I try not to be with anybody that's not above 6. So 7 and 8 is what I call a serious seller. These guys really want to sell. They do. Their problem is that they cannot sell below a certain number because they can't, their equity isn't there. So they are price constrained. In other words, they really want to sell their house to get to a better school system, but they only can go down to, say, $1.2 million to get there. And really their house is worth $1.1 million. So they're motivated, but they can't possibly do it. And the other is the 9 and the 10 seller, and those are what we call very serious. I actually used to write desperate seller on here, but everybody would say to me, well, I'm not desperate. But desperate sellers are people that absolutely have to be somewhere. In other words, they've died. That's somewhere. They are getting a new job in Chicago. They are, there's a very serious illness in the family. They're getting married. They're getting divorced. Divorce is very big. This is good. What else? They bought a new home non-contingent. So these are very serious sellers, and they behave differently than the sellers that are 5s and 6s. I'm not even going to talk about 1 through 4. They're not sellers. But they actually will act very different than the 5, 6, 7, and 8 sellers. And that's the market they're in. So motivation of your competition is going to tell you whether or not you're going to be able to play in the same sandbox.
Great info. I love the idea too, Jane, that you get the husband and wife to fill out the motivation scale.
Oh yeah. So that's.
You ever see a difference?
Oh my God. So I have been in a listing appointment where the husband's engaged at the table and the wife is sitting back like this. And I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? And they failed to tell me they're getting divorced. So
right.
Clearly, there's a motivated husband and a relatively unmotivated wife. So it's important that you know that both of these people are on board to sell this house.
Yeah. So on the reduction side, I mean, we have a number of people, it's funny across North America, some of the markets are crazy hot, some are a little bit slower, some are whatever. Some of the higher end stuff is not moving as quick as it should in different areas. Your suggestion on reducing those people, they're they do want to sell, they don't, but you don't want to take them off. What's your thoughts on that?
So, the thing about the upper bracket market, your people have like $40 million houses on the market. That is a forever listing. So you just have to let people know in the very beginning. I always say to them when I have upper bracket listings, I'll give you an example. I just listed a $4.5 million house. And in the last 2 years, one house sold in that price range. One. So I said to them, we have to be listed for 2 years. It may take a really long time for you to find your buyer. And you have to be patient because there's just not a lot of buyers at that price point. And they go, okay, I get it. I always have to go back on my upper bracket houses to remind them of the number of buyers out there. You didn't lose a buyer to another price. You just don't have any buyers.
Right.
I'm living in a very blue Democratic pocket of people there that are surrounded by the Trump administration and quite frankly freaking out. So I have a very emotionally tense and unhappy marketplace, which makes it difficult for buyers don't want to buy because they don't know if Trump's going to close the government down again, and that affects my market big time. A lot of people are losing their jobs at EPA, Department of Energy, and stuff like that. So, their market conditions really will affect how people behave. My upper bracket folks, generally, when you're that rich, nothing affects you. So if nothing affects you, then what you have is the ability to wait. And you just have to keep saying to people, I'm just telling you, it's not like we've lost a buyer. There just haven't been any buyers. So, if they get more motivated and they say, I really don't want to be here for another winter, I go, okay, let's try another price point. Well, when you're at 4.5, you know, you're not going to 4.25. You're going to 3.7 or 3.50. Because my feeling is if you were at 4.5 million and no one made an offer, then your buyers are looking, if your buyer's 3.5, they're looking up to 4.5 in a slow market thinking they can make offers. So, I mean, there is a script for every situation.
Well, it all works down. I mean, I say to everybody, it doesn't really, like, whatever the market is, the market is. All you can do is create your own by bringing the price down.
That's right. Price solves all problems.
Yep.
Price, everything. If you back to the Love Canal, price is going to matter. If you have a railroad running through you, price is all that's going to help. I mean, everything is price.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Questions for Jane? It's great, Jane. Really great. Anybody got a question for Jane? Pricing?
I just wanted to comment. I love the use of the word reposition, you know, as opposed to hammering on the word of price reduction. It's the repositioning in the marketplace as it is today. And I really think that that's a positive approach.
Improvement. So when we're marketing it, we market it as price improvement. When we're talking about it, it's to the seller, it's a repositioning.
Repositioning.
Beautiful. Questions, anybody? I'm sure you have some questions. Anybody? You got to unmute yourself to ask a question. Quiet group there, right?
Yeah. Where's Linda Craft? Is she on?
She's on, but she's muted. I don't see her videos on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. She's on. Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of people on. Carol Ann Kleins is on. Carol Ann, take yourself off mute. Bottom right corner, bottom left corner.
I'm glad there are other dinosaurs on this call.
She still can't get on. It's mute or unmute. Okay. Maybe we'll come back. Okay.
Oh, I
am.
don't know. Wait a
There.
minute. I got
There
it.
you go. You're on now.
So one of the things I learned from Jane a long time ago was this, and it's absolutely so valuable. The buyers don't say the price is too high, I find, and Jane is right, I think. But things like the rooms are too small, or it's 4 bedrooms and not 5. The people who say the price is too high are the agents. Would you still agree with that, Jane?
Absolutely. Because remember, your sellers will say to you, well, no, buyers have never told me that my house is overpriced. No, first of all, they're not going to tell you anyway. But secondly, that's not how they articulate price. They talk about what you don't have by comparison to the other houses they've looked at. So you're right. It's always, there's not enough bedrooms, the basement's not finished, there's no garage, there's no backyard. It's always what you don't have. That's how they measure value.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, great. Justin, did you have a question? Where do you go? Justin, there you go.
No, but it was all great.
Magda looks like she.
Magda, do you have a question?
What happens to properties that take more than one price adjustment?
Thing over and over again. You know, the approach is a good approach because remember, you don't control the market. So, you know, let's just say, I just had this, let's just say you drop to $1,295,000. And that's a reduction from $1,350,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know what, let's just say 2 weeks go by and nobody's showing it. That says something. Your biggest weapon is to always know what houses sold since your sellers have been on the market. That's a critical number.
Yeah.
I say it exactly this way. Mr. Seller, there have been 8 homes sold in our price group. That means to me 8 times A buyer had the chance to buy your house, but chose to buy your competitor instead. Just like that. So that they see the connection between the 8 sales as a loss to them. So you don't want to go another week. What if we go another week and you lose another 8 buyers? We don't want that to happen. So why don't we get to a price that will cause your house to sell to the next buyers that come along? I love the word cause. I love the sentence. Let's get to a price that will cause your house to sell.
Excellent.
Very good. Very good.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Jane. So let's say you got a house listed for $1.5 million, and you got to reduce the price. The seller knows he's got to reduce the price, but he's not willing to go to a new bracket that's going to affect any sort of change. Like he's going to go to 1.4, right? And he's not willing to go 1.350 or 1.250. He just says, either let's change it to 1.4 or just get me an offer.
So what you have to say to him is the 1.4 buyer has seen you. We've been on for 21 days, and that 1.4 buyer has been here, and they've chosen not to buy you. So Mr. Seller, what we're trying to do for you is change the buyers that see you by changing the houses you compete against. You are still competing against that same group. You're losing in that 1.4 to 1.499. You're losing. So let's at least go to 1.375. Let's just do that. Let's get to a new group of sellers that we can compete against so that you will have another chance at being the best house on the tour. I mean, you can't, you have to keep explaining to him that he didn't change a thing going to 1.4. Nothing. Same buyer, same sellers. And he's losing.
Right. So even if you explain it and hammer it home and he's still not budging to the new bracket, would you take that reduction or encourage him to stay where he is?
Understanding that we're going to let's give it another 2 weeks or 10 days, and let me see what the feedback is. Let me see what the traffic is, if we've gotten more showings. Let me see if the buyers are more positive about your house. Let's see if the agents are still interested in showing it. Because I always say to my sellers, you know when you're overpriced. People aren't coming. They stop showing it. You can't sell if nobody sees you. And what's happened to you is you've been on long enough and agents have stopped, that old thing. And of course, what do you think buyers say? If you've got 20, 25 days on market, in a spring market, that's a long time. So buyers are saying, how come that house isn't selling? What's wrong with that house? And if they're saying that, then they're saying to themselves, well, if I do still want to see it.
Yeah, what can I scoop it for?
Exactly. Because as soon as they see days on market, their first instinct is, what's wrong with that house? How come nobody wants it? And if nobody wants it, do I still want it? And if I still want it, I'm not going to pay that price. I say that to sellers all the time. I say, here's the buyer's script. I just did a video on, days on market and why they're your enemy. Time is the enemy of the seller, regardless, unless you're in that 25 million above. Time is the enemy of the seller.
Jane, I liked Justin's question too, which everybody hears a million times. Just get me an offer.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
So at this point, Mr. Seller, your offers are going to the other houses. You have to give me a hook to get people to come here to make an offer. I can't just make your competition disappear. I can't make them raise their prices to make you look better. All I can say to you is that the offers on your home are going to your neighbor's home.
Great.
What are you willing to do to get an offer?
Awesome. Good.
That kind
Any-
of conversation is face to face. I mean, a lot of us don't want to get out of our, little cubby holes anymore. Email only so good. Phone calls are only so good. These are eyeball to eyeball conversations so that they can't avoid you. It's so easy to avoid an agent who's trying to get you to behave.
So true. So true. Nobody wants to go out anymore. Just want to talk on the phone or do whatever. Eyeball to eyeball is the way to go on these things.
Absolutely. And it's customer service.
Exactly.
I like it. But it's customer service.
Any other questions? Anybody? I think we had some good questions there, Jane, and awesome as always. Fantastic. I know you're really busy right now, and really, really appreciate you taking the time, and our group will benefit tremendously from this. So thank you, and thank everybody for being on the call.
Thank you, Jane. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Jane.
Ken,
Absolutely.
before we leave, Ken,
Yes.
is this session recorded? Because
Yes.
I'm not sure how many of our team members had a chance to watch this, and I would very much like to share with them.
Sure. Yeah.
It is recorded?
Yeah.
Great.
So there are other videos and talks I've done. Just go to my website, janefairweather.com.
Great. Thank
Awesome.
you, Jane.
Very well.
Jane, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Bye, Kenny.
I'll call you. Okay, thanks. Bye.